Delaware's new Secretary of Education was hailed for his ability to hit the ground running. We thought we'd give Mark Murphy a month before we asked him to be our first person, so welcome to First.
Thank you, Shirley. It's great to be here.
Let's talk about grades. Grades are always a part of assessing academic achievement. So what grade would you give Delaware's education system for where we are today?
Great
like
question.
That question.
That's a great question. I would give Delaware's system a B right now. And I'd give it a B because there is tremendously positive work going on behalf of our students every single day. And we have room to grow, and we can definitely grow to that A.
And I know that the Decal Scores came out, and we saw some improvements.
Yes, yes, very encouraging. Very encouraging results, and we saw improvements of at least 7%. So 7% of our students proficient, and actually that translates to at least 7,000 students. So there are 7,000 students right now who are proficient, who were not proficient last year. So we increased those numbers of students who are performing at a level that we would like to see and that we feel comfortable with, and their parents are happy about. And those are preliminary results. We're still looking at those. The results will be official next month, but very encouraging and a sign of the incredible work that our teachers and our principals have been doing.
Were there any surprises with the results? Or were the improvements
well,
a result? Surprise?
I think that some people were surprised at the level of improvement. So oftentimes when we look around the country and we look at the gains that states make, we don't often see 7 percentage point gains in a single year. So there may have been surprise there. But I think that if you dig underneath that and you ask what's going on in our schools, and you start to unpack the great stuff going on, piece after piece after piece after piece, then it becomes not a surprise. The other aspect that people on the outside may be surprised about, but hopefully none of us on the inside are surprised about, is that many of our gaps in achievement between groups of students are beginning to narrow. And so we saw 2-3 percentage point narrowing of those gaps this past year, which is also very encouraging.
About a year ago, we had your predecessor, Dr. Lillian Lowry, here, and we had done an interview with her. And we were talking about DCAS and the whole new assessment format. Yeah. And she was saying that the format gives teachers a good way to prepare for the test, and you teach to the test to see improved results. Do you agree with that?
I wouldn't say it that way, and so I'm not sure what Dr. Lowry meant by that statement. I have a huge amount of respect for her, and I've worked closely with her. The way that I would say it and the way that I would mean it is that we don't teach to the test, we teach to our standards. And our test measures how our students do against those standards. And so we have a set of standards that we teach to in Delaware, and we are in the middle of transitioning to the Common Core state standards, which have been adopted by the vast majority of states around the country. And so those will be the standards that we use to guide our planning of instruction, our delivery of instruction, and our assessment of instruction week to week, day to day. Our DCAS assessment, the assessment students take multiple times a year, that will measure those standards. And so our teachers teach to the standards, and the test assesses that.
Okay. Let's talk about your background. Former teacher, former principal, so you kind of have been enmeshed in education. You're also part of this nonprofit group, Vision Network of Delaware.
Yes.
And they had this plan, Vision 2015.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what that was.
Yes. So the plan and the work predates me by about 4 years. But I joined the Vision Network to help lead that a year ago, a little more than a year ago. And what the Vision Network was work with schools. It was the practice arm of Vision 2015. So years ago, 2006 ballpark, they created a plan around some policy agenda pieces. But the Vision Network was separate. The Vision Network was how we practice, how we build leadership in our schools. And so the great work that I got to do with the Vision Network was with more than 24 schools around the state, across 6 districts, both district schools and charter schools, our VOTEC schools as well. And it was about working with our schools to empower the leadership to not only build their leadership within their school, the principal and the leadership team around that principal, but also then to build networks networks where this school is working with this school, and school in the southern end of the state that is doing great work in a specific area is able to share that work with a school in the northern end of the state. And so it was about building the leadership within the school and about building leadership across a network of schools.
So then how did your experience, you were executive director there, how did that experience qualify you to now serve as Secretary of Education?
Yes, well, I think that experience is part of what qualified me to be Secretary of Education. I actually, if I really had to narrow it down, I think that the best experience that I've had and the knowledge that I rely so deeply on is the work that I did as a teacher, an assistant principal, and a principal. That is work that happens in our schools. It happens closest to our children, and that is the work for me that needs to inform all of us as we set up systems, as we execute policies that support those people. Now, what the work in Delaware did for me is it gave me a real good understanding of the context here in Delaware, the strengths that we're seeing in our schools as well as the challenges. It also gave me a chance to experience firsthand with our schools here how the systems that we set up at a state level, at a Department of Education level, how those systems impact the people who are working with our children each and every day. And so that gave me an understanding there, and really helped me to forge some relationships with people, with our superintendents, with our principals, and to start to build some momentum. So it helped to qualify me, but the work that I did as a teacher and a principal, and actually I spent about 5 years working around the country with more than 500 schools, and that was an additional component that really helped me to broaden my perspective on what's working and what's possible.
Now, present day, you give the Delaware education system a B, like you said earlier. What grade was it at when you first signed on with the Vision 2015 project?
Well, I had only been with the Vision Network for a year, so I don't know what the grade would have been then. What I do know, though, is that some tremendous strides have been made in the last couple of years, and some policies have been put in place that are really the foundation for us to carry the work forward in our schools and do great work moving forward. And so what the grade was, I'm not sure, but I do know that there was great work underway, and there was real momentum long before I ever came into this office.
Race to the top, you're kind of coming in the middle of everything.
Yes.
Is that a disadvantage, or have you been trying to work furiously to catch up and figure out where we are right now in the middle of the implementation of the money?
Yeah, I don't think it's a disadvantage. I think in some ways, actually, it may be an advantage, because part of the skill set that I believe that I bring to the office is a skill set and an orientation around sweating the details. And we are in a place where much of what the experience is for our teachers and our principals and our counselors and the people in our schools, much of that experience has changed, and much of the system around them has changed. The standards we're teaching to, the curricular materials have changed in many of our districts over the past few years. The way that we are evaluating our teachers and our principals, those things are all changing. And what that requires from a state level is a real attention to detail and understanding what that looks like in our schools, the successes and the challenges, and paying attention to the implementation very closely. And so I bring that to this job, and so I actually think it's an advantage for me to come in at this stage. Working furiously, yes, of course, but that's what's required to make sure that our teachers have what they need.
Are there concerns about the race to the top funding should Mitt Romney win this year's election?
I think that the concerns that I'm hearing are concerns about the funding long term and about how we sustain our efforts longer term. So much of the questions that come from our teachers and from our superintendents and from the public is when race to the top goes away. That's usually how it's said, when it goes away, when that funding stream goes away. What are we going to do? How are we going to sustain this good work? And I think that first of all, let's call out that that's a really good thing, because people are recognizing that what we're doing is working, that it is having a really positive impact. And so they're asking, how do we sustain that? And the second aspect of that is that we need to do some really critical work in the next 2 years to identify the things that we want to hold on to. What are the efforts that we're implementing right now that will continue to have benefit for our educators? And those are the efforts that we should attempt to sustain and find funding for, and really potentially reorganize some of the funding or the mechanisms that we have to deliver those types of support. In terms of worrying about whether Mitt Romney is going to come into office, we're worried right now about implementation and serving our students, and we'll focus on that.
Okay, well, Mark Murphy, Delaware Secretary of Education, we give you an A for coming in to our studio. Thanks for joining us as first person this week.